My name is Riley Morgan. I was 10 when everything shifted. Dad came home with Cynthia, her bright smile, sparkling eyes, and her daughter Bella, who seemed to light up every room. They fit perfectly into the life Dad was trying to rebuild, but I felt like a shadow slipping further into the background. Bella was everything I wasn't. Blonde, bubbly, effortlessly adored. She bounced around the house like she owned it, laughing loudly, claiming spaces and attention. And Cynthia? She watched with a quiet, almost sharp smile that never reached her eyes when they landed on me. I tried to be normal, to smile back, to be the good girl who helped with chores and stayed out of trouble. But Cynthia's coldness was a silent barrier. It was in the way she never asked how I was doing, never invited me into conversations, never looked my way except to remind me I was the outsider in this new family. Dad stayed mostly quiet. His love was there, sometimes just a hand on my shoulder, but it wasn't enough to shield me from the growing distance. I saw it in his eyes, a mix of guilt and helplessness, like he wanted to fix this but didn't know how. Every day, I watched Bella become the golden child. Birthday parties, weekend outings, new clothes, and whispered plans. None of it was for me. I wasn't just the stepdaughter. I was the invisible one, the one who didn't quite belong. And it hurt. Deep, twisting, pain that I didn't yet have words for. The sting of being unseen by the people who were supposed to love me most. It was the first time I realized that family isn't always about blood or promises. Sometimes it's about who chooses to see you, and right now they weren't. But even then, in that quiet hurt, something stirred inside me. A little voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to wait to be chosen. Maybe I could find my own way to belong. That was the beginning, not just of a new family, but of a battle I hadn't yet signed up for. And I was already tired. The chores were endless, but they were mine. I scrubbed floors, washed dishes, folded laundry, anything to keep the peace, to avoid drawing attention. Cynthia made sure I stayed busy. It was her silent way of reminding me where I stood. Meanwhile, Bella floated through the house like a princess on a cloud. Designer dresses, perfect hair, and a smile that made everyone melt. Cynthia's eyes sparkled with pride whenever Bella was around, but when they glanced at me, the warmth vanished. It was like I was a mistake she tolerated rather than a daughter she loved. I remember one night, standing by the kitchen sink, rinsing a stack of plates. The kitchen light flickered overhead, and through the window, I saw Bella and Cynthia sitting on the couch, laughing over some silly story. Their voices filled the room like music, but I felt like static, buzzing in the background, unheard and unseen. I tried to speak up sometimes, asking for a little kindness, a little fairness, but those moments were met with cold silence or sharp looks. Cynthia's words were few but pointed. "You should try harder," she once said after I spilled juice at dinner. "Maybe then you'd get some attention." Dad said nothing. He rarely did. His silence was a shield, but also a wall. I couldn't climb. I was left to wrestle with the unfairness alone. The house felt smaller every day, suffocating under the weight of unspoken rules. Bella was the golden child, the one who deserved everything, and I was the shadow, the one who had to make do, with scraps. I felt invisible and small, like I was shrinking inside myself just to survive. But no matter how much I faded, I held onto a thread of hope. Somewhere beneath the chores and the cold shoulders, I knew I was more than this. I had to be. But hope was fragile, and every day I wondered if it was enough. When the acceptance letter came, I couldn't believe it. A top university, the kind I dreamed about in late-night whispers to myself. My hands shook as I held it, heart pounding like it was the only thing keeping me alive. Finally, this was my chance. A way out, a way up. I rushed to tell Dad, expecting to see his pride, maybe even a little excitement, but all I got was a tired sigh and a sideways glance toward Cynthia. Then came the words that cut deeper than anything before. "We're saving the college fund for Bella," Cynthia said flatly, like she was delivering a fact, not a blow. "Maybe you should consider community college." I blinked. Community college? That wasn't the plan. Not after years of working my fingers raw, staying up late studying, earning every scholarship and job. I thought family meant support. I thought it meant standing by each other. But here was the truth laid bare, like a wound exposed. They had no plans for me. Not really. Dad's hand found my shoulder, a soft squeeze and a murmured, "I'm sorry." Sorry wasn't enough. It was never enough. I sat there in silence, feeling the walls close in. That night, I cried. Not just for the lost tuition, but for the years of quiet rejection, for the unspoken message that I was less, that I was a burden. But amidst the tears, something stubborn flickered. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wouldn't take the easy path because it was offered to me. I would fight, harder than anyone expected. I made a promise to myself that night. I would make it. Not for Cynthia, not for Dad, who wouldn't stand up, but for me, for every late night and empty stomach, for every time I felt invisible. College wouldn't be a gift, it would be a victory. One I'd earn with sweat, sacrifice, and sheer will. No one handed me a golden ticket. No one waited with open arms or cheered me on. I carved my own path, each step heavy with exhaustion, but fueled by a quiet fire that refused to die. Scholarships became lifelines. Applications filled every free moment. I learned to juggle classes with part-time jobs, cashier shifts, tutoring, anything that brought in a few bucks. Ramen noodles were my staple, a constant companion through late-night study, sessions, and early morning classes. I didn't have time for tears or complaints. There was no luxury of feeling sorry for myself. Not when every textbook cost money, every credit was a battle, and every internship was a hard-won prize. The nights were the hardest. After long days, I'd collapse onto my threadbare mattress, too tired to feel the ache in my shoulders or the gnawing hunger in my stomach. But I kept going, because giving up wasn't an option. Meanwhile, photos of Bella's perfect life flooded social media. Designer bags, spring break trips, laughter under foreign skies. I scrolled past them, a mix of bitterness and resolve, twisting in my chest. It was unfair, painfully so. But I didn't let it break me. I learned to celebrate my small victories in silence. A scholarship won, a glowing professor's email, a paycheck saved. These were my milestones, quiet, invisible to the world, but deeply mine. Dad still stayed silent most days. His apologies felt empty, but I refused to rely on his guilt. I was building something stronger, something no one could take away. I was tired, bone-deep tired, but also proud that I was here, still standing, still fighting. This wasn't just survival. This was claiming my worth. While I was counting pennies and stretching every dollar, Bella's world sparkled with ease. I watched her posts, sun-drenched. Beaches, designer labels, friends I barely knew, all paid for, wrapped in luxury and care. It was a life so far from mine, it felt like a story told in a different language. Cynthia's praise was loudest for Bella, broadcast across social media like a spotlight that didn't just highlight her daughter, but drowned out everything else. Every achievement, every milestone was posted and praised, creating a perfect picture of privilege that left me invisible. I never got a mention. No likes, no congratulations. It was as if my struggles, my victories, didn't exist in their world. There were moments when the sting of it was sharpest, like when Bella casually mentioned a European spring break trip over dinner, expecting everyone to be impressed. The truth was, I was proud of her, but I also felt the weight of what I'd never been given. I kept those feelings locked inside, though. I wasn't about to let jealousy poison what little peace I had. Instead, I turned that pain into fuel, proof that my worth wasn't tied to their recognition or approval. Their world was theirs, full of privilege and easy love. Mine was mine, hard-won and earned, and I was determined to prove that my version of success, quiet, relentless, and earned, was just as valid. I kept my head down. No need for fanfare or boasting. While Bella's life was loud and flashy, I built mine in the background. One line of code, one late night, one small breakthrough at a time. I landed an internship at a tech startup sophomore year. It was grueling, demanding, but it was mine. I wasn't just surviving, I was learning, growing, making myself indispensable. By junior year, I was launching products, solving problems, earning stock options while others partied or took it easy. I didn't tell anyone. Not Cynthia, not Dad, not Bella. They had no idea I was quietly climbing a ladder they assumed I'd never reach. I let my work speak for me, not the empty words or silent neglect at home. Sometimes when the house was quiet, I allowed myself a small smile, knowing that I was doing exactly what I needed to do. That even if they never saw me, I was seeing myself. The late nights coding, the endless debugging sessions, the sacrifices, all were building something bigger than just a paycheck. I was carving out a future that no one could take from me. Was the youngest senior developer at a billion-dollar company before I even graduated. But the real victory was knowing I did it on my own terms, without waiting for anyone's approval or help. I'd become invisible to them, but invaluable to the world I was creating for myself. The morning of graduation, I stood in my honors robe, heart pounding, not with nerves but with quiet pride. Magna cum laude. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had led here. As I scanned the crowd, I caught glimpses of familiar faces, friends, professors, mentors. But Cynthia and Bella? They were there too, pale and stiff, their eyes wide with disbelief. I wondered if they knew what was coming. Then the university chancellor stepped up to the mic, voice steady and clear. This year's largest endowment comes from a former student, Ms. Riley Morgan, who, despite financial obstacles, has pledged $500,000 to create scholarships for students who are overlooked, unsupported, and underestimated. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I could feel the weight of their surprise, the shock radiating from Cynthia and Bella, as if the world had just flipped upside down. They hadn't known about the late nights at the startup, the stock options, the promotions. They hadn't even known I was working toward something greater all along. For a moment, I let the silence hang, a quiet power that spoke louder than any words. This was my moment, not just to celebrate my success, but to reclaim my story, to show them and the world that worth isn't given, it's earned. After the ceremony, the crowd thinned, and I found myself walking past Cynthia and Bella. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, mouths open, but no words came out. For years they'd dismissed me, ignored me, treated me like I didn't belong. But now, I was here, standing tall, whole, proud. I caught Cynthia's gaze. It was filled with disbelief, maybe regret. Bella looked away, cheeks flushed, unable to meet mine. I could have let anger spill out, years of pain, neglect, and quiet suffering begging for acknowledgement. But instead, I chose grace. "Funny," I said gently, voice steady. "How much you're willing to invest in someone once you see their value." I saw the confusion flicker in Cynthia's eyes, the silent question hanging between us. Luckily, I continued, I never waited for you to see mine. Then I turned and walked away, not with bitterness, but with a strength that came from knowing my worth wasn't tied to their approval. The silence behind me was louder than any argument could have been. Walking away from them felt like shedding a heavy, invisible weight. All those years of doubt, of feeling unseen and unheard, began to unravel, not with bitterness, but with quiet certainty. I realized then that my value was never theirs to give or take. It lived inside me all along, hidden beneath the layers of hurt and sacrifice. For so long I'd sought their approval, hoping for a sign, a word, anything that said I mattered. But the truth was, waiting for that was a trap. It kept me tied to their indifference, to a story that wasn't mine to own. I was more than the stepdaughter who did the chores, more than the girl who wasn't enough. I was a force shaped by resilience, determination, and a refusal to be defined by others' blindness. In that moment, I embraced my worth, not as a fragile hope, but as a solid foundation. A foundation built from every late night, every sacrifice, every quiet victory no one else noticed. It was the start of a new chapter, one where I stood fully in my power, not because I had to prove anything to them, but because I finally believed it for myself. With the scholarship fund, I wasn't just celebrating my own victory. I was paving a path for others like me, those overlooked, underestimated, and forgotten, the ones who struggle in silence while the world looks the other way. I wanted to create something different, a chance for students who didn't have a safety net, who had to fight like I did, because no one should have to pay their way alone. No one should feel invisible in their own home. Giving back wasn't about proving a point to Cynthia or Bella. It was about turning my pain into purpose, transforming rejection into opportunity. Each scholarship was a beacon, a quiet rebellion against the odds, a reminder that worth isn't measured by privilege or approval, but by grit and heart. I stood tall, not because I needed to, but because I chose to. Because my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who dared to believe in themselves despite everything, and that was the greatest triumph of all.